Virginia, mountain mama, take me home. Country road, and West Virginia. Period, Bill. There's 104 days of summer vacation. Trying to find out how to spend it. But then you have
Now, why would you need 3 barrels of hydrochloric acid? This is a Wendy's.
Oh shoot, we're gonna have another long one here.
I haven't even memorized the preamble.
Yeah.
I've neither. I even studied my binder thing. I only know half the.
I know the 3 barrels.
I only know
don't
the half.
remember the matches
This
and
is-
stuff.
I have so much stuff to do this week.
See, you mixed up your cleaning products with your food. That's another violation. Now, why would you need 3 barrels of hydrochloric acid? This is a Wendy's.
We play basketball. I'm on Evans.
What?
I'm on Evans.
And what? And gym? Nice.
Pretty good.
Electronic devices.
I thought you'd be bad because you have Evan on your
Well, Evan is all Evan does is do grading shit.
Why would you need 3 barrels of
But you're gonna think, go away.
acid? This is a Wendy's.
He is gonna get points deducted off his grade.
Let's say
Like very shots when you like.
Wendy's is honestly trash.
Yeah, it's pretty tiring.
It's actually a good question.
Because Wendy's uses hydrochloric acid.
You can't fall asleep.
That's disgusting. Like Wendy's, I don't get it. Square burgers. No, like they're
I mean, at least they use
circular.
grilled chicken. I like McDonald's. McDonald's
Okay,
uses like
McDonald's is so
scraps. I like dipping fries in
Now we have journals too.
But Wendy's also has
It is
trash
like-
fries.
Yeah.
Oh my god, McDonald's
They're so
fries.
salty and good.
Okay, praise McDonald's fries.
You're not gonna be in English.
I haven't taken a
Oh,
single
wow.
note in the past
That's
4 days.
a day ago.
Yeah, I remember the preamble.
I'm doing it. I'm just playing this song in my house.
I literally learned it while playing
Andrew,
Mr. Miller came out with a journal.
they say it was.
Yeah, like just today. No, he said, I came up with a journal and she said we're gonna do like.
Then after something, that we're gonna have a skyline, like a building, that it's Skyline Chili, and that only skylines are in Ohio. Now,
Skyline is just my stomach and my friend only wants Skyline. And I'm
I
like,
hate Skyline, it's disgusting.
I just started.
Okay, but if the skyline's disgusting, I don't have to.
okay, I don't like him. They're every week.
The building I have for my skyline is the New York skyline. From Long Island, you can, across the bridge, Manhattan,
Long Island's
see
small.
skyline. The building type of skyline doesn't only exist in Ohio. And Skyline Chili is trash and it will never be Ohio.
I don't like Skyline in general.
Beetlejuice.
We the people.
I literally just want to one Beetlejuice again. I get so many.
Hey.
I want to see
It's really good for
You know what? You know what was confusing if you listened to it for the first time? Heather's. Like, did Heather kill herself?
No, she was murdered. If you watch the movie.
Well, what? The movie
No, it's on Netflix. Dead serious.
Wasn't she murdered by Veronica?
Yeah, Veronica
JC,
and her
JD.
and her boyfriend. They slammed her head into a glass table.
And they made a fake suicide note?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought she committed suicide.
It's a musical. It's not a movie.
It's the movie first. The Riverdale version is complete garbage.
Do you get it yet, Jeffrey?
Max,
You don't get it still? You get it?
I get it.
What?
Read this. We come on and grab it. Tell me if you get it.
Yeah, they
They
say
said religions and soul things.
That is big brain.
Big brain.
Big brain.
Big brain. Like that actually makes sense. I don't get it.
They say relationships solve things. So in that case, why wouldn't you get your problem?
Because if relationships solve your
You can
problem.
solve your problems.
Wait, say it again.
Read it. Just read it.
I know I read it like 5 times.
If you were in a relationship with your problems, they get solved.
Oh.
So that means you have to date our math problem?
Ha ha.
No, protect me.
Yeah, I'm gonna start dating,
Just coming out. What a shame.
No.
reviews. Should.
Andrew. Trust me. Do you trust me?
No. Who does?
No one.
Just trust me.
No.
Andrew. The only person you can trust is yourself, because you can't really lie. You can't trust yourself. Okay?
No, stop.
You're in control of your own actions. Why wouldn't you? Yeah, I don't trust you. Andrew, you're making this so much harder. I just want to give you a high five. I don't put my
Sure.
I swear. I
Yeah, just not to my hand.
I know it. I swear it is. I'll shake on it. What?
I'm sitting down.
No,
No.
I'd rather try it.
Smash the slap. Wait, does that mean you have a crush on me?
No.
Wait, what? Smash will slap your crush on me.
What?
You like
Actually,
it?
really just going around. No. Oh, no.
Me and Hyman are seeing how many times the other person can slap. One of us.
I'm not talking right
Yeah,
now.
what are you about to say?
So I walk down the hallway.
You know how many
What?
times I think
Let's see, we have.
It's maybe Hyman who can slap more.
Can slap.
Let's go ahead and begin. First of all, make sure that you have your homework down, which is to be ready for our quiz on tomorrow. Remember, parts of that particular quiz. I'm also very happy to see that folks have their electronic devices out and ready to go. We had to do that on yesterday, and I think on today, and on yesterday, I knew that was going to be the case. And I think on today, because I want to make sure that we get everything done. So now let's just do as the agenda tells us to do. All right, please remember just a couple of things. Just because our rights, now actually, why don't you put your electronic devices down for this bit, and make this statement. So based on what you have learned so far about the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, you've only learned about the first 6. And based upon what you have learned so far, take a look at the screen. Just because our rights are written on a piece of paper, it doesn't mean that the arms of government will always follow what is written. So perhaps for some of you that was an epiphany. You assume that the government especially is going to follow the law. But you saw 2 cases on yesterday in which that wasn't the case. One young man's 4th Amendment right was violated. Another young man's 6th and 8th Amendment rights were violated. And I can tell you that that happens all the time. It's probably happening right now. Matter of fact, I'm not going to say probably. It is. I know it's happening right now in various places in the United States. So democracy, kids, doesn't come easy. After you create it, after democracy is created, you have to work to maintain it. Because oftentimes governments are going to default into trying to violate, into trying to break those rights. That is why, as I told you, Thomas Jefferson suggested that a country should have a revolution every 20 years or so. Because he said federal governments are going to get out of hand, They are gonna violate people's rights, and they're gonna have to be reminded that this is a land of we the people. So, get that in your mind, that rights are constantly violated, and, look at the screen again, it can be very difficult to fight for your rights. See, this is where the difficulty part comes in. You have to spend money on lawyers, you might be in the spotlight, that's gonna take time, energy, money, etc. It's very easy to violate your rights, but it is very difficult to restore them. But when you do restore your rights, boys and girls, when that one person does fight for his or her rights, you're actually fighting for others. Because now the people who fought, the individuals who violated those rights, they're going to perhaps think again. They're going to think twice before they do it again. So when one person fights for their rights, they're actually fighting for others. But it does take time, very expensive. As I pointed out on yesterday, typically poor, brown, and black folks are often on the front lines of rights being violated. You saw that clip on yesterday where it said only 12% of defendants in New York City are able to make bail, probably because most of them are poor and can't afford it. So there's a lot that I can actually say about that particular sub-bullet point. There's a lot of data, a lot of statistics. That could take a whole nother lesson. But it is something I would like you to keep in mind, that the examples that I gave you, and most of the examples out there, are of poor, brown, and black folks when it comes to rights being violated. I mentioned to you the different financial ethic. It's just a different life. It just is. I told you about how many poor folks want to use cash. They don't really have a relationship, many of them, with the bank. For transportation, typically city transportation is what people use. I'm talking like the bus. Now buses have changed these days. They have these cards and whatnot that you can use. But I remember when you get on the bus, there's a little change machine in the front. You put your quarters in and whatnot. So transportation. I told you when I was growing up, I remember little actions that my parents would take in order to save money. You could only, in the bathtub, only have the water up to a certain level, but a little barking on it. We used candles. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. We used candles to keep the light bill down. And I remember heating the stove and lighting the pilot light on the stove when I was a kid. Because the pilot light is under the stove, and so I have to get on the floor with a match, and I was always scared. As a little kid, you're scared of gas and whatnot. But I'd have to light the pilot light, and then we'd open up the stove, and that's how you would heat the house, so you'd save money on the furnace. Insurance, I remember my mother telling me many times, be careful, don't speak to me while we drive. We don't have insurance now. I've got to make sure that I don't make a mistake when driving. And then lots of times I'll have to fun. It's a different life, right? That's the best way I can say it. Also keep in mind, there are organizations out there that are dedicated to preserving and strengthening and fighting for your rights. The ACLU and the NRA. If you haven't already, consider bookmarking their websites or YouTubes and at least Googling them to learn a little bit more about them. The ACLU concentrates on the Bill of Rights and the National Rifle Association on the Second Amendment. A lot of times, I mentioned to you on yesterday, the ACLU sometimes isn't well liked. They'll go in, for instance, if you have some rural school district in the middle of nowhere, and let's say everyone in the community is a Christian. You know, we have separation between church and state, right? So they're in the middle of nowhere, and they think because everyone is a strong Christian in the community, they can get away with posting the 10 Commandments on school property or reading the Bible in school. They say, we're in the middle of nowhere, no one's going to know this, we're a strong Christian community, but maybe one student, one family is an atheist, or perhaps one family follow a different religion. And so they'll get on the phone, call the ACLU. The ACLU will swoop in and sue the school district. So anytime one of the first 10 amendments is being violated, people will sometimes threaten to call, I'll call the ACLU, you better stop this. Because the ACLU is relentless until a right is restored. Just an FYI on a side note, these two organizations tend to be politically oriented. The NRA tends to be sort of an arm, political arm of the Republican Party, and the ACLU often works in conjunction with the Democratic Party. So that's neither good or bad, but it is a fact that's out there. If you were ever talking about the ACLU or the NRA, understand that people's political beliefs are going to influence how they think about those organizations. All right, boys and girls, we're going to complete learning about the Bill of Rights on today. On your electronic device, you can click the button now. And next, right, the Second Amendment. This is pretty straightforward. Well, actually, it's not. To be honest, it's kind of complicated, but I'm going to give you a simple version. Right to trial by jury in civil cases. So you have the right to have your case decided by a judge or a jury. In a civil case, now, there's two types of laws. I really don't want to get into this because it can be a little complicated. There's civil law and then there's criminal law. Okay, so for instance, if you call the police out to a situation, a disagreement between two people isn't necessarily a crime. The police may come to a situation that's very contentious and two people are arguing and there's some kind of matter that needs to be resolved. But the police may say, if you ever watch these cop shows, you'll see it. The police might say, well, there's not a crime being committed here. This is a civil matter. If you don't like this, then you need to take that person to court. This is not, we're the police. We only deal in crime. This is civil. You don't like something that that person is doing. That person has broken a contract. That person has promised to do something that they didn't do. That is civil. So you can sue that person. But we as the police, we can't do anything. We only deal with criminal matters. There are two sets of laws. There is civil law and criminal law. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of the difference, but the bottom line is you have the right to choose a judge or a jury in civil matters. And some judges are known to be harsh on defendants, some are known to be lenient. So your lawyer might say, you know what, I've been in front of this judge before. You should probably choose a jury because I know how this judge usually rules on these matters. You should choose a jury. Or your lawyer might say, don't go with a jury, go with a judge. Based on your case, I know how this judge thinks, and this judge probably is going to rule in your favor, so stick with the judge. All right. Eighth Amendment. Freedom from excessive bail. So it's the judge's discretion, although sometimes there are laws in different states, but it's the judge's discretion to determine how much your bail is. And usually it depends upon the crime. So if you committed murder, maybe your bail, if the judge allows bail, is going to be in the seven figures, $1 million or millions of dollars. If it's something else, serial shoplifting, maybe it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. Or a judge could say no bail. So a lot of times it's up to the judge. And the lawyers, boys and girls, typically have to make that point. So the defense attorney will stand up and say, Judge, please don't give any bail. My defendant is a good person. This is the first mistake that he or she has made. Don't give any bail. Then the prosecution will stand up and say, Judge, we think the bail should be very high, and here's why. So the judges will make their case, and then, the lawyers will make their case, and then the judge will decide. One thing that I hope you've learned over the past couple of days is basically how our criminal court system works. So if you think about it, even though you've learned about the Ten Commandments, I've also told you a lot about how our court system works. Okay, then, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. That's subjective, and that's something for the judge to decide. So, Mr. Bell, what's cruel and unusual? Well, the judge decides that. For instance, recently, a few years ago, our Supreme Court said it is cruel and unusual punishment to lock up a child for life. So if you're, 13, 14, or whatever years old, and you commit a murder or something really bad, previously it was legal for a judge or a jury to give that kid life in prison, or maybe even the death penalty, although I think that was reversed a few decades ago. But now our Supreme Court says you can't do that. And so if you're 14, 15 years old and you commit a murder, maybe your prison sentence is going to be 30 or 40 years, but it won't be life. Take a look at this report.
I'll move to a March 8th preliminary hearing to see if prosecutors have enough evidence for Constable stand trial.
A new Supreme Court ruling gives convicts serving life sentences for crimes they committed as juveniles another shot at freedom. News 8's Jack Corpella reports on how that impacts cases in the Susquehanna Valley.
This is like sending somebody to their room for life.
Some Pennsylvanians are sentenced to life in prison before they can legally buy a pack of cigarettes. The Supreme Court has decided to give them a chance at a new sentence.
It recognizes the fact that juvenile offenders can be rehabilitated. This isn't just lock the door and throw away the key.
It's a ruling that could impact more than 500 juvenile offenders statewide and more than a dozen in Lancaster County, including Anthony Lewis, who at age 17 was involved in a murder in Lancaster nearly 20 years ago. His attorney says Anthony Lewis never pulled the trigger. He was the lookout for the homicide that occurred here on Duke and Liberty at this convenience store in 1996.
Lewis was mildly mentally retarded. He had a third-grade reading level. And in fact, in his statement to the police, he told the police he was doing this out of fear he might be shot.
Bright says the new ruling is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Convicts must prove they are worthy of a reduced sentence.
And you're not opening up the floodgates and allowing all these convicted murderers out of jail. That's not the intent here. The intent is to treat juveniles the way they were initially meant to be treated.
In Lancaster, Jack Rapella, News 8.
Supporters of the old law argue juveniles who commit murder should be treated the same as adults.
And so, if a person is 53 years old and you committed your crime when you were 16 and you were given a life sentence, because of that ruling, you now go back into court and you get resentenced. So it's retroactive. And there were a few people who were, let's say, in their 50s. They went before the judge, and the judge says, time served, which means that that 53-year-old now gets out of prison. And of course, to some people, that was a shock beyond belief. Here's that 53-year-old man who thought he was going to be in prison for life, and now, within a few weeks, his world is turned upside down because of this ruling. He goes into court, and the judge bangs the gavel and says, you are sentenced to time already served. So the time that you've been in prison, that's your punishment. You are now free to go. Others, maybe the judge says, okay, I'm going to have you serve for 10 more years or whatever. But that ruling was retroactive. So there were a lot of old people in prison who committed their crimes when they were kids who now got a new sentence. All right, the 9th and 10th Amendment are pretty straightforward. The 9th Amendment, listen to this, it's sort of a catch-all. If this is what the Anti-Federalists did, listen to this. The Anti-Federalists stated, we don't want our rights to be fenced in. We don't want our rights to be fenced in to only these specific rights. So the Anti-Federalists say there may be future rights going forward that all citizens should have, that the courts should recognize. That's what the 9th Amendment means. It means that We can't think of everything now, but in the future, someone might have a really good idea for a right that all Americans should have. And when that idea is thought of, the courts should then recognize it as a right. I'll say it again. The Ninth Amendment is sort of like a catch-all. It basically is saying that, okay, we can't think of all of the rights that citizens should have right now. So in the future, if a person or persons come up with a good idea for an excellent right that all citizens should have, the courts should recognize it and make it a right that a government can't take away. Finally, the 10th Amendment. If it's not in the Constitution, then it's up to the states. If it's not in the Constitution, then it's up to the states. That's why in some states, something is legal, and in another state, it's illegal. Some states, for instance, have made marijuana legal, so people can sell it, buy it, whatnot. But in other states, it's still illegal. So you can be right here on the border and do something, and right here it's legal, and then over here it's illegal. If it's not in the Constitution, the state gets to decide what they want to do at the top. That's why sometimes people say, I'm going to take this to the Supreme Court. And they'll take it to the Supreme Court, and it'll get there, and the Supreme Court will say, this is not a constitutional issue. This topic is not in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court will kick it back down to the states. So the Supreme Court will say the states have to settle this. This is not a constitutional issue. Okay, boys and girls, so what I'd like you to do right now is to carefully read through thoroughly all of the Bill of Rights and email me about any that you need clarification or any that you would like to make a comment on. If you need to turn to a neighbor and ask a question about a particular amendment, I will allow it. But this is your opportunity to give as much clarity as you can. So take that moment now, please. As you are reading, you should be saying to yourself, okay, I just read the amendment. I read my notes. I read Mr. Bell's explanation. I get it. Next. Okay, yes, I understand that. Okay. Next. Uh-oh. This one I'm not sure I understand. Now, why is that? Then think of a question. you send a lot of questions on this week. Please check your, even if you're not sending an email out, you may want to check your email to see any answer back in. With your knowledge about the Bill of Rights. So open your binder to entry number. A. Give time to explain these things. I think I'm just going to explain one, although I go ahead and say this. Look what it says here. It says give time to flow. Write about what your favorite amendment is and why. So you're going to have to do that, but I thought I would just throw that out there now. Before I formally tell you to do it, this is something to me that you can just almost kind of get done. So by the day that I announce it, by the day that I say, okay, kids, do this, and here's what you've got to do, you've already got it finished. As some of you may or may not know, December 15th is National Bill of Rights Day. So in about a week and a half, it is National Bill of Rights Day, where we celebrate the Bill of Rights. So this is something I'm not going to technically talk about on the day, but you probably, maybe want to go ahead and get it done while it's fresh in your mind. Okay, you have got to create what you kids call a meme. Although when I first saw the word, I thought it was Mimi, so that's what I called it. Well, that's what I called it for years, actually. So your Bill of Rights meme or your Bill of Rights Mimi. This is what you have to do. If you would go ahead and just read through the directions 1 through 8. So read through those, and then I'll show you some examples of this. ago, kids were into this website called MySpace. And so I remember a student wanted to check this website for my computer. He said, Mr. Bell, I'm going to check MySpace. I said, well, this is MySpace. You know, Mr. Bell, I want to check MySpace. This is MySpace. You can't check. It's my anyway. We got into an argument. So this is what your final product will look like. So this is the Second Amendment. And so you see that this person created a clever saying. So they created a saying, and then they have an image to go along with it. Then they follow the instructions. I'll leave these, by the way, on the podium for you to see, because I know for many of you can't see because it's so far away. But you see they did exactly what they were supposed to do. Look, they put the amendment, Second Amendment, then right to bear arms, and then they explain what it is. Okay. Here's another one. This is the Eighth Amendment. And here is the Sixth Amendment. So you see the clever saying, and then the image, and then the explanation. Now, some explanations may take more than others. Some explanations, the explanation is almost within the amendment itself, so there's not much explaining to do. But anyway, and this one is really hard to see, I know, but this is the Eighth Amendment, and it's talking about no excessive bail. So here's the criminal. Here's like a force field serving as the Eighth Amendment. And here are the negative things that could hurt the person if it wasn't for the Eighth Amendment protecting them. So you see this person kind of put some things together. They didn't simply use an image, they kind of used technology to create something themselves. So this is what your final product has to look like. And again, I'll put these over here for you to see. And now I'll entertain questions. Oh, yes, ma'am.
If you make multiple, can we have extra credit?
Yeah, I actually do provide extra credit for one additional one.
Can I make like 17?
Yes, I'm only going to give you credit for one. All right, other questions? Yeah, maybe look at your sheet again, kind of think, kind of contemplate. Yes, Trey?
How much is like an extra credit?
I don't, it depends, every year I change. Trey?
When is this due?
I haven't decided yet. I'll tell you maybe on tomorrow. Isabel?
When do we get to assign the amendments?
I'm sorry, what?
When do we get the assigned amendments?
In just a moment. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Do we get to pick which amendment?
No, I have to do that just because I allow people to pick when you're choosing your favorite amendment to write about. I do allow that. But as far as this goes, I have to choose. Otherwise, some amendments, 80% of kids choose them. And then I have a lot that aren't used, so I kind of have to do that. Okay, so I am now going to assign these. And once I do, you can begin the process. And I would encourage you to use the process that I have on entry 8. So first do what it says to do first, then do what it says to do second, so on and so forth. I would say use this particular process because I've seen that work well in the past. Okay. As you know, many of the amendments are broken down into different parts. So the First Amendment, for instance, is made up of 5. So each one is going to be separate. One moment. All right, please make a record of the amendment that you're going to receive. Either circle it on entry 8 or whatever you want to do. Or actually circle it on entry 7, because entry 7 is your Bill of Rights list. Ethan, Amendment 1, freedom of religion. Ethan, did you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so circle that. Drew, Amendment 1, freedom of speech. Isabel, Amendment 1, freedom of the press. Trey, Amendment 1, freedom of assembly. Luis, Amendment 1, freedom to petition. Caroline, the Second Amendment. CJ, the Third Amendment. Andrew Heineken, the Fourth Amendment. Mia, the Fifth Amendment, right to due process of law. Okay, so Mia, make sure you're doing that specific portion. So if I've given you the First Amendment, make sure that you're only doing the specific portion that I stated. Or when you have the Fifth Amendment and others, make sure that you only do the portion that I stated. Zachary, the Fifth Amendment, freedom from self-incrimination. Paige, the Fifth Amendment, freedom from double jeopardy. Nicholas, the Sixth Amendment, right to counsel. Julian, the Sixth Amendment, right to a speedy and public trial. McKenna, the Seventh Amendment. Audrey, the Eighth Amendment, freedom from excessive bail. Michaela, the Eighth Amendment, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. Delaney, the Ninth Amendment. Saskia, the 10th Amendment. Okay, now going back to the top. Heidi, the First Amendment, freedom of religion. Nicole, the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Joshua, the First Amendment, freedom of the press. Quinn, the First Amendment, freedom of assembly. Jeffrey, the First Amendment, freedom to petition. George, the Second Amendment. And Andrew Zimmerman, the Third Amendment. Okay, now, listen. Make sure, of course, that our memes are appropriate, especially if you have the Second Amendment. You may want to, well, actually, I would say this to all of you. Throughout this process, you probably want to check things with me. If I were you, I wouldn't print out anything unless you check it with me first. So, Mr. Bell, do you think this would work? Or do you think this is an okay saying? Do you think this is an okay picture? Yeah, so just make sure that it is appropriate. And again, the Second Amendment is probably the most difficult because it's, kind of controversial. And obviously, we can't have images of guns and whatnot just because it's a school. But we do have a Second Amendment. We can't act like we don't have it. We have a Second Amendment. Again, we have to be appropriate about it. So I would say check with me as much as possible. You may now move around the room if you would like as you engage. And we'll get the goings on. Right, we'll have something in the background in just a moment.
Play the preamble song.
Oh, you know what? You're right.
Play the shorter version so we can learn it.
You are right. That's what we should do. Now, having the preamble loop, of course, could potentially drive a person insane, but you have to memorize it, so just get it in your head. By the way, like most things, I'm going to give you, hold on a second. I'm going to give you plenty of time to work on these in class. Okay, I need to find a shorter version. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it can make you crazy. As you come up with different ideas and whatnot, maybe share them with neighbors. So tell your neighbor, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Or say to your neighbor, I can't think of a good saying. Can you help me come up with a good saying? And then I think on tomorrow, I can start to check to see where you're at.
We the people in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and truth, the best of tranquility. Provide for the common good, promote the general welfare and stand, secure the blessings of liberty. To ourselves and our prosperity,
I just wanted to remind you again, listen kids, even though I have given you one, I've assigned you one. If you have a passion on a certain amendment, you can make a meme out of that, and that can be your extra credit. So you do have to do the one that you're assigned, but if you want to do one more that you want to do, then that of course will count for extra credit.
Yeah. I'll like change like how it
So I'm cutting a picture of our clothes up the fences were about him on his back and like for Paris, things like that are kind of offensive towards him. And then at the bottom or top I'm gonna put we need to press. And he said we need to do it on the it's not about spitting on that catchphrase which seems to be really
Yeah. I'm glad to see people, a couple of folks have come up to me and they've shown me their ideas. That's probably what you should do. And I was also glad to see Isabel literally typed up on a Google document. She typed up the amendment and then she typed up ideas and had a couple of ideas written. So you may want to do some pre-thinking and then show me where you're at. By the way, a tentative due date on this will be the Monday of the last week before break. So that gives you about a week and a half. Don't think this is going to be due on tomorrow. I'll give you plenty of time to do it in class. You really don't have to work on it at home. You'll have plenty of time in class. And I think we'll do it sometime on